Welcome to the Langley Adams Library. This is actually our last event in the Created Equal series that we've been hosting. And thank you all for coming and being part of it. We have several of the speakers here that have been part of it. And it has been provided by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities in partnership with the Gilda Lehrman Foundation as part of their Bridging Cultures initiative. And it's been a fantastic time. This is the 10th program that we've had, so it's been a busy month, good month. And I think we will all enjoy this. Tonight we have Kim and Reggie Harris. Kim and Reggie Harris. We're right here. Kim and Reggie Lewis. We'll be here and singing for us, and we have had a vast experience with Freedom Riders and singing Underground Railroad songs and educating people. And a nice trip with students down to Mississippi this past weekend, or week, the whole week. And we also have Mike Wolfson, who was one of the Freedom Riders back in 1961, who is a scientist at Boston.
Harvard School of Public Health.
Yes, Harvard School of Public Health. And so we are going to listen to a couple songs first, and then show about a 10-minute clip, and then open it up for talking and asking questions and enjoying. So, enjoy.
That was nicely done. First we'll destroy the equipment. Completely altering the evening.
We do have an odd formation tonight.
Yeah, we have big feet too.
So, well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, and thank you for being here. We are thrilled and honored and ready to sing. Freedom, give us freedom. Freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, give us freedom. Freedom coming and it won't be long. Well, I took a little trip on a Greyhound bus. Freedom coming and it won't be long. To fight segregation, 'cause this we must. Freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. But we had a little trouble in Montgomery town. Freedom coming and it won't be long. They burned that bus right to the ground. Freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. But the Freedom Riders, we come to stay. Freedom coming and it won't be long. We got another bus and we're on our way. Freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. Freedom, freedom, freedom coming and it won't be long. Now please, take out one hand so we can see that hand. Just one hand. Warm that hand up a little bit, please. Take out the other hand.
You have to put your pencils down for that.
Yes. Warm that hand up. Okay, now we need just a little bit of percussion. Oh, freedom is something you cannot hide away. Freedom coming and it won't be long. We must work for freedom every day. to get a chance to be here tonight.
We are honored anytime we get to sing, and particularly when we get to sing songs related to freedom and justice, and the movements that have created such opportunities for freedom and justice in America. And certainly, the Freedom Rides were one of those amazing events in American history.
But the singing of the songs is not something that only the people up in the front get to do. Because the singing of these songs comes from a tradition in which everyone sings together. So if you would please turn to someone near you and say to them, I can't wait to hear you sing.
And we'll begin with a song that's been around for a long, long time. And it's a very easy song to sing. You don't have to learn any words, because in fact, we'll be following Kim as she sings a line. We'll just sing it back to her. Kind of like this.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
to freedom land.
to freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
to freedom land.
to freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
to freedom land.
freedom land.
I'm on my way. Oh yes, I'm on my way. Yes, that last line, we all do that one together. I'm on my way. Oh yes, I'm on my way. I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I won't turn back.
I won't turn back.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I won't turn back.
I won't turn back.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I won't turn back.
I won't turn back. I'm on my way.
Oh, yes, I'm on my way. Now that sounds pretty good. But I have to admit, the singing sounds rather polite.
Oh, that's a good word.
Yeah.
We're looking more for joyful, boisterous, exuberant.
A little louder. Imagine if you were standing with a crowd of people at a protest march, at a rally, you know, your voices have to be heard. People sang to get their spirits up. People sang sometimes to help hold off fear. People sang to send out a message, sometimes a message that might be picked up by those early TV cameras that were there. And people sang, yes. Okay, I see you're ready to get that good. So make sure you're sitting in those good singing positions. You know, like I do in school. All right, so let's try it again. Here we go. I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To freedom land.
to freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To freedom land.
to freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To freedom land.
freedom land. I'm on my way.
Oh yes, I'm on my way. I asked my mother.
I asked my mother.
see the Freedom Riders DVD? Did you get to see that? Okay, a fair amount of people. What we'd like to do is to show just about 10 minutes of the DVD, just to jog your memories or to create, to get you to see a little bit of that, to set the context for what we'll be talking about. While you are watching, think about, what's your first impression when you hear this story, when you see what happens to the people? What are some of the first things that come to your minds? And then, of course, what questions would you love to ask a Freedom Rider if you got the chance? Aren't we lucky? So.
Thank you.
I wish to apply for acceptance as a participant in course Freedom Ride, 1961.
To travel via bus from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, Louisiana, and to test and challenge segregated
facilities en route. I understand that I should be participating in a nonviolent protest
against racial discrimination, that arrest or personal injury to me might result.
The Freedom Rides of 1961 were a simple but daring plan. Congress of Racial Equality came up with the idea to put blacks and whites in small groups on commercial buses, and they would deliberately violate the segregation laws of the Deep South.
We were to go through various parts of the South, gradually going deeper and deeper. 6 of us on the Trailways bus and 6 of us on the Greyhound bus, and see whether places were segregated, whether people were being served when they went to get something to eat or buy a ticket or use the restrooms.
One of the major thrusts of the Freedom Ride was to get the movement into the Deep South. Most of the action up to this time had been in the Upper South or in the North. And one of the ideas here was to go into the deepest South. We were hoping that this would start a national movement.
Corps had this set itinerary. They anticipated that this would be a 2-week trip, that it would culminate down in New Orleans with a real celebration on the anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And there's almost an element of naivete attached to it, how easily they thought it would go.
I'm a senior at American Baptist Theological Seminary and hope to graduate in June. I know that an education is important, and I hope to get one. But at this time, human dignity is the most important thing in my life. That justice and freedom might come to the Deep South.
I have no doubt that the Negro basically knows that the best friend he's ever had in the world is a Southern white man.
We talk about it here as separation of the races. Customs and traditions that have been built up over the last 100 years that have proved for the best interests of both the colored and the white people. There's not been one single change.
The colored man knows where he stands, the white man knows where he stands. We have signs saying colored and white. The colored man knows that he is not to enter there.
Well, the nigger's all right in his place, but they've always been behind us, and just tell you the truth, I want them always to stay behind me, because I never have loved a nigger, mister.
You cannot change a way of life overnight. The more they try to force us into doing something, then the worse the reaction will be.
Our colored people will do exactly as they've done. Our white people will do exactly as they've done. Why? Because it's worked out best.
It was all-encompassing, this so-called Southern way of life. Would not allow for any breaks. It was a system that was only as strong, the white Southerners thought, as its weakest link. So you couldn't allow people even to sit together on the front of a bus, something that really shouldn't have threatened anyone, but it did. It threatened their sense of the wholeness, the sanctity of what they saw as an age-old tradition.
Travel in the segregated South for black people was humiliating. The very fact that there were separate facilities was to say to black people and white people that blacks were so subhuman and so inferior that we could not even use public facilities that white people used. The Supreme Court even said that there was no right that a black person had that white people had to respect.
You didn't know what you were going to encounter. You had night riders, you had hoodlums. You could be antagonized at any point in your journey. So most of the time it was very, very difficult to plan a trip. And you always had to meet someone to meet you there because you didn't know what to expect.
We're rolling along the highway. There is merry adventure in every wonderful mile. We're gliding along the highway, light-hearted and free in streamlined style. As we travel over the countryside of romance.
My father traveled quite a bit, and he just wanted a cup of coffee to make it to Montgomery. And he had to go around the back of the cafe to get a cup of coffee, and then they told him,
Sunflower Elm Regiment does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
pushed him out the door.
It's a wonderful happy feeling, going along the broad highway. There's the open road in view, every mile there's something new to make your trip a happy, thrilling thing to do.
I grew up in the South, child of good and decent parents. We had women who worked in our household, sometimes surrogate mothers. They were invisible women to me. I can't believe I couldn't see them. I don't know where my head or heart was. I don't know where my parents' heads and hearts were, or my teachers. I never heard it once from the pulpit. We were blind to the reality of racism and afraid, I guess, of change.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
And when John Kennedy was elected in November of 1960, there was great hope and expectation that things would be better on matters of civil rights. There was a contrast between him and Dwight Eisenhower. He was young and had ideas and talked about the new frontier. But when he gave his inaugural address in January of 1961, he talked about spreading freedom all over the world, to China, to Latin America, to Africa, to everywhere but Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia.
The base of the Democratic Party was the essentially white voting South. The Kennedys had to be careful about antagonizing Southern governors and the whole Southern establishment, which was segregationist.
Oh, I was the first governor in the South that publicly endorsed him for president.
I think he's a person who is sympathetic to the problems and conditions in the South. I think he's a man who will work with us down here.
I knew that you couldn't run for president on a segregation ticket, so I knew that. But I felt like that if we ever got in a situation where we needed some understanding and some help from the federal government in regard to our problems down here, that I'd get an audience.
The entire nation will be looking at us on election day and will judge the way we feel about the segregation question by the size of the Democratic vote on November the 4th. Let's turn out the largest Democratic vote in the history of the state and show the people of this nation that we're not going to tolerate integration of the races 1 minute.
The Kennedys, when they came into office, were not worried about civil rights. They were worried about the Soviet Union. They were worried about the Cold War. They were worried about the nuclear threat. When civil rights did pop up, they regarded it as a bit of a nuisance, as something that was getting in the way of their agenda.
It became clear that the civil rights leaders had to do something desperate, something dramatic to get the Kennedys' attention. But that was the idea behind the Freedom Rides, to essentially dare the federal government to do what it was supposed to do, and see if their constitutional rights would be protected by the Kennedy administration.
I'm James Farmer, National Director of the Congress of Racial Equality, more often known as CORE.
CORE needed to do something to demonstrate that it really deserved to be mentioned in the same sentence with the NAACP or SCLC or Martin Luther King. For James Farmer, this was a way of saying, I need to be brought into the discussions at the national level about how the civil rights campaign was going to be conducted.
Farmer thought among the other benefits of this Freedom Ride would be added elevation for CORE, because elevation for these groups means everything. It means money, it means support, you get prestige, all that comes with publicity, and I'm sure Farmer was hoping for some publicity.
I do not think we can lose. We cannot lose unless we allow ourselves to be so divided that we lose a sense of direction and common purpose.
The idea of the Freedom Rides is a really radical idea. The idea of going into Mississippi and going into Alabama and challenging segregation so frontally and so aggressively in many ways is something that alarmed not only those who opposed civil rights, but those within the civil rights community.
They thought it was too confrontational, that it was going to backfire, it was going to set the movement back. It was too risky. CORE just didn't have the resources or the skill or the know-how about the inner workings of Jim Crow and racism and how to fight it in the Deep South. And that was very likely that they would get arrested, they might get beaten up, they might even get killed.
May I have a cup of coffee, please?
Now look, I don't want any niggers in here.
What are you doing here? Don't you know?
The training that we did in Washington, D.C. prior to the time that the writers got on the buses was largely devoted to trying to see how the person is going to react.
Are you with this fella? Why, yes, we're both interstate bus passengers. Where are you from? I'm from the United States.
By using nonviolence, people see the contrast between your dignified, disciplined confrontation of the wrong and then the reaction of violence. No way of confusing that confrontation.
To move? No, I don't move when I'm in the right. Well, then we'll...
The Freedom Rides, I think, typified one of the standard contradictions within the civil rights movement. On the one hand, it's nonviolent, doesn't hit back when hit. On the other hand, they're really courting violence in order to attract publicity that will forward the cause. And so you have these mixed motives. Let's hope nothing happens, nobody's hurt. On the other hand, suppose something does happen, wouldn't that in an ironic way be good for us? People at CORE thought maybe some bad things will happen, but I don't think they imagined anywhere near the kind of level of violence that they'd meet in Anniston and Birmingham and in Montgomery.
It was make-believe, and it did not scare me, perhaps because it was make-believe, and I wasn't sure I'd really have to use all these techniques with our nonviolent behavior and our goodwill. I thought we could do anything.
Do you expect any trouble?
There is a possibility that we will not be served at some stops. There is a possibility that we might be arrested. This is the only trouble that I anticipate.
I'm taking a trip on the Greyhound bus line. I'm riding the front seat to New Orleans this time. Hallelujah, I'm a traveling. Hallelujah, ain't it fine? Hallelujah, I'm a traveling down freedom's main line.
The first day getting on the bus, it was a good feeling. It was a good feeling. We were together, it was comradeship, it was a good cause. And we were going for the movement, you know, we were going for the people.
Boarding that Greyhound bus to travel through the heart of the Deep South, I felt good. I felt happy. I felt liberated. I was like a soldier in a non-violent army. I was ready.
Hallelujah, I'm a traveling. Hallelujah, ain't it fine? Hallelujah, I'm a traveling down freedom's main line.
When the Freedom Riders board those buses in Washington, D.C., those are regularly scheduled buses. They're not chartered, they're not special buses. They have a couple of representatives from the black press, but no national media following them, and they certainly don't have any protection, whether from the police or from the military or anything. I mean, they're going down on their own, on regular buses, and are going to see what happens to them.
I thought white folks were going to pull a fast one on us. They were going to integrate the facilities during the time that we were there. And as soon as we left, they're going to go back to doing business as usual. And in a few cities, that did happen.
The first 2 days of the ride was uneventful. And it basically was a piece of cake. James Peck and I, we realized that, you know, this is not going to be as bad as we thought. If we could do this all the way through, then we would have achieved what we had set out to do.
Well, almost certainly there wouldn't have been a Freedom Rides without Irene Morgan. She refused to give up her seat on a bus in Gloucester County, Virginia. In July of 1944, she took her case all the way to the Supreme Court. And in Morgan versus Virginia in June of 1946, on paper at least, the Supreme Court struck down segregation in interstate travel on buses.
But no state in the South obeyed these decisions, so it was as if they never happened. The Greyhound Bus Company, the Trailways Bus Company, were able to hide behind the refusal of state law to accommodate to federal law. So despite the fact that you'd had these national rulings, which should have been law every place in the country, they weren't in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, across the South. Business as usual.
When we got to Atlanta, there was a little reception for us headed by Reverend Martin Luther King. And of course, it was a great privilege for all of us to meet him. He was an icon of the movement.
They had hopes not only to meet Dr. King, but maybe he would become a Freedom Rider. He'd get on those buses with them. But he pulled some of the leaders of the Freedom Ride aside and said, look, I hear some pretty disturbing things from my sources in Alabama. The Alabama Klan is preparing quite a welcome. And furthermore, many people in the movement think what you're doing may do more harm than good. King said, I'm not going to get on the buses with you, and if I were you, I probably wouldn't go into Alabama.
Later that night, Jim Farmer's wife called from Washington to tell him that his father had died, which meant that he was going to have to leave for a few days and leave other people in charge. he was the main man, and losing him was quite a sobering thing.
Jim Peck kind of took over, but the leader was not there to lead, and we would have to lead ourselves. And we were getting into the most dangerous part of the trip.
There were 2 buses leaving Atlanta for Birmingham that Mother's Day morning. One Greyhound, one Trailways, 2 groups of Freedom Riders. They left an hour apart. Only one made it all the way to Birmingham.
It was such a beautiful day. It was such a quiet feeling that day. It was bright and sunny. The sky was blue. And it was just a beautiful scenery. We didn't have a sense of fear.
These people are going from town to town and getting off the bus and seeking through mixed groups, Negro men and white women, to force themselves into situations which tend to inflame the local people in such a manner as to incense them and enrage them and to provoke them into acts of violence. That's what they are doing.
It was a very disconcerting period. It was as if one civilization was just coming unhinged and was free-floating and taking on water. People in the South felt, I'm being asked to live in a different way. I'm asked to have different attitudes. I'm asked to behave differently. And as I'm being made to do all of these things, there are people who come on the TV in my own living room and tell me that I'm a redneck and I'm a racist and I'm all of these things. And by God, I'd like to, I just like to punch some of them damn agitators right in the face. I gotta hate somebody. I got to hate somebody.
I lived with my family 5 miles out of Anniston on the Birmingham Highway.
Stop it now. What?
It's really something to see. So, all right, take a minute and just talk with somebody near you. What kind of impressions did you get, from watching that? What feelings did you have? What are you thinking about? So just talk to the person next to you just for a second. You join us?
First of all, I can't hear. My ears are totally blocked.
I've done all these shows, most of these shows from the beginning.
You can't hear either.
Sure.
At least I can tell from this you're doing like me.
So anyway, I've done most of these shows from the beginning. The 10 shows, 8 out of the 10. Black slavery, taking over the boat, watching the different organizations. To this stage, it's hard to believe in the 60s.
I feel like it should be over.
after 150 years of having houses, you don't have any more.
What happens, I guess, when the soul gets sick, if I can say it clearly, when the soul gets sick, when the soul sickness, it's something that doesn't release quickly or easily. I don't know about the other few, but there are certain situations in family relationships, for whatever reason, they don't get to a healing process. That's the surface. This is the deep-seated cultural support of moral thinking and the soul. I mean, like, to hear anger. I'm an old man like the moving picture. And to hear the anger, to touch the agitation, it's like there's a blind spot. It's so full of what's going on. What's coming on
Scary thing. Wow. I keep seeing this here, and the trouble is it's around the world.
Want to go to Angola
Or Afghanistan and Iraq. We're downtown in
different cultures and different patterns of behavior.
Everybody say
Everybody say
Everybody say
freedom, freedom, freedom.
We all want
freedom.
We all want
freedom.
We all want
freedom, freedom, freedom.
Will you fight for
freedom?
Will you ride for
freedom?
Everybody say
freedom, freedom, freedom.
In Anniston,
freedom.
In Montgomery,
freedom.
In Jackson,
freedom, freedom, freedom.
Everybody say
freedom.
Everybody say
freedom.
Everybody say freedom, freedom, freedom.
So what were your impressions when you saw that? Yes, please.
How come Rosa Parks was not mentioned in there?
May I ask it differently? Why does Rosa Parks get all the credit when she clearly wasn't even remotely the first?
Well, this actually happened after Rosa Parks.
Oh.
Yeah, Montgomery was in the 1950s,
But
and this is 1961.
But that woman was earlier, that Irene Morgan.
Yes, Irene Morgan. Now, what's interesting, we were talking about this before, when you think about black people working for accommodation in public transportation, you really have to go back. I mean, in terms of the famous people that did it, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth.
Actually got thrown off of buses or carriages in Washington,
In
D.C.
Washington, and actually in the book there it says she sued and she won and got the conductor that threw her off of the horse-drawn streetcar, got him fired. You know, so black people have been working for accommodation in public transportation for a long time. Now it is a good question about, you know, what was different about Montgomery. Now when you think about the Montgomery bus boycott, that became a mass movement at a time when it was able to get mass publicity and became the basis for some other movements. The other thing about Montgomery was that it was not that long after the Brown versus the Board of Education decision. And that's part of why they even had the movement in Montgomery. So,
and one of the other parts of, I think, the Rosa Parks is that, first of all, it was a very carefully chosen case. They had other cases they could have chosen, but they needed everything to be in place so that they couldn't be assailed on other points. There was one case where a young woman had been thrown off the bus and she had had a baby, so they thought, well, they'll just say that she's a bad girl who, you know, was causing trouble. So they were looking for cases, in each case, they were looking for cases that could stand up to the letter of the law, and Rosa Parks, being a hard-working, married black woman
with a spotless record was one that they could hold up to public scrutiny and not have her on morals charges or not have her looked at as some troublemaker. And then, of course, it goes to the Supreme Court, which then sort of iconizes her. So, and she would be the first to tell you that, you know, she wasn't the first to work for free, and that she hadn't planned that day to keep her seat. You know, but she was part of the NAACP. She was prepared that day in her heart, but all she wanted to do was get home. And actually, they prevailed upon her to take the case, and she actually did not say yes right away because she knew that there were a lot of things to think about. But that was actually, yeah, that was before all of this, and in looking at the freedom rides, you know, we're looking at also a planned movement, but obviously, as you can see, the people, for the most part, they had no idea of the level of violence that was going to be incited. And of course, as you know, in the next segment, the bus is attacked, and that's not the, you know, not the last. Other buses are then attacked, and the call goes out for other people to go on the buses.
And the idea, because we were talking about impressions, and that it does seem interesting that, you know, there's the thought that maybe we will make it through. You know, maybe it won't be as violent as we think it's going to be. And
now, one of the other huge things about this, as you can see, is this is an interracial movement.
Right.
There are black and white people on the buses protesting. And that is the first. Now, it wasn't the first thing. There were obviously black and white allies from the time of the Underground Railroad.
Right, and at the Congress of
Racial
Equality for the Journey of Reconciliation in 1947, there were also black and white people working together. But that's part of what also, you know, makes these rides, you know, very important. And as we would say, it makes some other things happen. Because if you notice the way they were talked about, they said, we have, you know, black men and white women. Yeah. Now there were black women on there, they're not mentioned, but the, you know, the flashpoint is the black men and white women. Okay, so one or two other impressions, and then I want to, you know, we would definitely want to hear from Mike. So other impressions, yes, please.
It's sort of minor on the scale of things, but I'm so grateful that they went, and grateful that I was in my high school years and alert enough to be aware of what was going on, even if I wasn't ready to do any participation. I'm just glad I was tuned in, that I was here to be tuned in when this was starting. But that the challenge of trying to change a cultural way that's just you've been indoctrinated in, whether it's here or wherever it happens to be, and that you just, the fighting is going to always be like this. There's no like easy way because people don't want to give it up.
Right. Now, where did you grow up?
It's fearful. Northwestern Connecticut. Nice, safe Northwestern Connecticut.
Now, okay. Safe for who?
There was no prejudice because there were no blacks in town.
So we might ask the question, who was discriminated against?
Well, I found out after I left high school that there was a little bit of, or maybe a lot, I don't know, prejudice against Jews. But I wasn't aware, because as far as I know, there weren't any Jewish people in my town either. But I'm maybe poor and well-to-do. I mean, all of that we played with. I did go to camp with a black girl, and I remember my mother telling me that she was so much later that she was pleased that amazed that I didn't even bring it up as an issue. It was like I was a little kid. But that's quite a different experience from what these folks were going through.
One more before we.
Another impression.
Yeah, I grew up in a fairly large city in western New York, Rochester, New York.
Oh.
I'm familiar with Frederick Douglass, obviously. Part of our culture there. And I grew up playing sports integrated from the time I was a little kid. And I went to college, the same thing. And really, the Freedom Rider area, I was busy. I was young, single, having a good time, playing sports. It was later on in the 60s that the whole thing hit me when the riots occurred, because we had them in our city. That's when it really came home to me, more so then, even though I was aware of this because of the news media, you know, television, but when it hits home with the riots that occurred in 1964, I think it was, that the city of Rochester had racial riots. And people I worked with, they were afraid to come to work. And our city was shut down for a week, burning and looting and everything else. That's when it became real to me, how horrible things were.
What started it, Mom? I mean, to go to that level?
Primarily, you know, it's hard to say what started it. It was summertime, it was hot, nights were hot. Police presence, at that point the police force was probably all white. And police presence in black neighborhoods, young people get agitated at that point. One thing just led to another. What actually started, I don't know what started. It started on a Friday night. And it just escalated from that point on.
And there were several cities where, you know, those kinds of things would happen.
We weren't the first city that had it. I mean, there have been other ones, but you know, you don't think it's going to hit home until it does. Makes a real difference.
Now, what's interesting, yes, please.
When was Selma? I remember Selma, Alabama more than I do.
Right, 1965.
That was 65.
So, now, Mike, you grew up in Los Angeles, right?
Well, I was born in Chicago.
Oh.
Lived there till I was 9 years old, and then my family moved to Los Angeles. But instead of me just talking about myself, it might be that some questions could be asked that would help me explain some things better.
How were you even aware that they were, how were you aware of kind of a recruitment process? How did you even hear what was happening?
Well,
Can I just ask, some of us, my ears are totally blocked, I can't hear a thing. Well, I'm listening very hard.
Well, we can all move up a little bit.
yeah, I can definitely come closer. I actually like meetings where everybody's in a circle because then everybody's facing each other, but we're not going to rearrange to do that. and it's enough people that it'd be hard to do. But I came from a political family, so my stepbrother, my older stepbrother, was one of the leaders of the boycott of Woolworths, because that was the, you know, the first sit-ins in North Carolina, and the solidarity all over the country. People wanted to express that this is the start of something, and we got to make it bigger and bigger and grow so that we can actually make something happen. So I have been participating in that. That was the year before, 1960. So then I was not particularly politically active. I was concentrating on my schoolwork. I wanted to become a scientist, and I had to study hard, and every once in a while I would do something when an opportunity arose. So it turns out that one of my friends in high school, and I can't even remember her name anymore, my memory has never been very good, but her church, this is an African American friend of mine, had raised money to buy 12 round-trip tickets to Jackson, Mississippi, and they were looking for people to volunteer, and she asked me if I was interested, and I told her I would discuss it with my family and make a decision. And I discussed it with my family, and they thought that I was a good person to to participate in this. They knew that I was, how do you want to call it, non-aggressive. That wasn't true of my stepbrothers and sisters. They wouldn't have been able to do it.
Right, now when you say your stepbrothers and sisters, there's a great article about Mike that WGBH has, and it's on the internet, so Reg and I were reading it on the way here, and in that article it says that you grew up in an interracial family.
That's correct. My mother, when my mother married for the third time to my stepfather, was African American. Now, our families had lived half a block away from each other in Chicago when they were two different families.
Oh, wow.
And my oldest sister had actually, my oldest stepsister, had actually come to live with my mother and my father and my sister and I way back when I was too young to remember. And she didn't move out until she got married. So I was in a milieu that was definitely integrated, and it was a perfectly natural thing, because one of the biggest efforts of the communist movement was to fight against inequality and oppression of black people. And it wasn't just out of the goodness of people's hearts. It was an understanding that if you look at the weaknesses in the labor movement historically in the United States, it's largely derived from the inability of black workers and white workers to figure out how to conduct struggles in common. They were pitted against each other. And so if you're trying to build a strong enough working class to basically control their own economic destiny, then you had to fight this struggle. And so, you know, I had read lots of books. Even I like to read books anyway when I was a kid. So I had read a lot of books about the history of struggle, and I had learned a lot. I knew things about the South that I don't think the average white person knew. So it, in a certain sense, that made me not afraid, because I had a sense of what I might have to be engaged in. So that's how I became a freedom rider. Now, we have to know that this was the time I went down was in July. It was just before my 18th birthday, in between high school and college. And where was I going?
Well, I was amazed at hearing that you were 17 years old, and that made a difference. Because now first you had to ride the bus from Los Angeles to Jackson, right?
Well, I'll give a little more detail on that. Here, the point that I was going to make was that the Congress of Racial Equality had their people in Los Angeles to explain to us what the situation was right at that time. And the situation was that the government, the Kennedy administration, was terribly concerned about the image of this country in the rest of the world. As it was explained there, he didn't care about the condition of oppression of African American people, or oppression of anybody anywhere in the world. But when we're claiming to be the foremost democracy in the whole world, and we're going to give leadership, and we're going to help other people become democratic who are not, it didn't sound too good when the experience of African American people became widespread knowledge. all around the world. So they told, the Kennedy administration told the state of Mississippi, you cannot allow what happened to those first freedom riders to happen anymore. Yes, you know, you can go ahead, arrest people, put them through a kangaroo court, get them convicted, and put them in jail. But that's the extent to which that's the only thing we're going to put up with, and that's not going to cause any big stir anymore. The same thing isn't going to happen again and make my government look bad. So that made us feel like, you know, even though we knew that even with that commitment, that there was still a possibility of danger, but we were not expecting terrible things to happen to us. So now, one of the things that the way that the journey was arranged is that we actually stopped over in New Orleans, and we got more orientation. And one of the things that they made clear to us is that when you're out on the street among other people, don't talk about what you're doing, because in fact, several of the freedom riders who came through there before us have been actually arrested, put in jail on false charges to keep them from being able to go on to Jackson. And since our objective was, well, Corps' objective was to flood the jails so that they wouldn't have room for all of the freedom riders who would come. But, you know, something like 300 and some people, I can't remember the exact number, was the total number of freedom riders. 430. And when they filled up the city jail, and they didn't have any more room, they put all the freedom riders into the state penitentiary at Parchment, which is a big farm, and basically slave labor. When they didn't have enough workers to do all the work, they would go down the street. Anytime they find somebody who's unemployed, throw them in jail, off to Parchment. That's how they did it. And it wasn't just African Americans, but it was mostly African Americans. So I think I spent enough time on answering that one question.
So, all right, so you got on a bus in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
right? And went down to New Orleans. Did you have to sign that paper that we saw people reading, that we saw John Lewis reading? You know, that said, I know there could be violence, and did you have to do any of that kind of thing?
I have no recollection of
Wow.
what I signed. But whatever it was, it wasn't going to hold me back.
Right. Right. So when you got on the bus in New Orleans for Jackson, basically you're charged up, you're ready to go. You reach Jackson. What happened?
Well, they had a quote welcoming committee in the bus station because they knew we were coming, and they were yelling and they were angry, but there was police. And I don't know how much the rest of the folks here understand, but there was no separation between the leadership of the police and the leadership of the Klan. It was all one.
Yeah, right.
So when the police are told by the governor, you do this, then the Klan was told the same thing. So they knew what they could get away with and what they couldn't. Now, one thing that did happen, so we got off the bus, 12 of us, integrated, black, white, male, female, and we went into the black waiting room. It's like one bench along a wall, you know. you understand that separate is never equal, and it certainly wasn't there. So while we're in there, just for a few minutes, the police let in 2 or 3. They had chosen who they were going to let in. We didn't know. We weren't expecting anything. And they came in, and we're all sitting there, and they came along, and they kicked 2 or 3 of us in the leg. No serious injuries, but and then they hauled them back out. Okay? Well, or they just went back out. It wasn't. It was obvious it was staged. So we come to find, after we get convicted of breach of peace, which is the charge that all the freedom riders in Jackson were convicted on, we found that those of us who had been assaulted were accused of assaulting the very same people who had come and attacked us. And we actually held, and this is, assault is a felony. This is it. You know, breach of peace is a misdemeanor. You know, misdemeanor is like a $200 fine or 6 months in jail. A felony, you know,
you're going to prison.
Yeah, you're going to, you're right. So, so they haul us before a judge. It wasn't a jury, and these people come in who attacked us and testified against us. Very quick. It wasn't a long trial. And since we knew that it didn't make any sense for us to say anything, so here comes the judge when it comes to making a decision. He says, "I know you're guilty, but the situation is that I've been told that I have to not convict you of any crime that you actually committed." And that's it, we were off. Now, to me, this was just they wanted to point out to us, anytime anybody does something in the South, anywhere, that they don't like, that's what's going to happen to you, if not worse. But the whole legal system was set up in a way to intimidate and to keep, especially white people, from doing anything to act against the oppressive system. So that's the part of the story that sort of not brought out in the historical things, but I think for me it was an important feature of my experience.
So basically, they put you on notice that it's going to be like this from now on.
And I mean, the idea of, when you think of it, it's one thing, because even thinking about the bus and Rosa Parks, back to her, it was just as illegal for a white person to say, "I'm going to go sit in the back of the bus with black people," as it was for a black person to say, "I'm going to sit in the front of the bus." The laws were there to really keep that system, the way that it was. Now, I have a question. What did you all wear? Were you given instructions on the clothing that you should wear during these protests?
I think we had to wear, not real casual clothes, but not real formal clothes either. So, and I don't have any recollection of exactly.
I noticed in most of the mug shots, the men have ties.
Yeah. Oh, so you saw, suits and ties in those mug shots. And because there are a lot of times when we're with young people, and we're talking to them about the fact that it, especially for the young black people, for the African Americans, to you were to dress in something close to what you would wear on a Sunday, because you were to show yourself to be you know, upstanding, clean, respectful, you know, of everything, so that there would be a real contrast, you know, between the way that you conducted yourself and what people were doing to you. And especially, and Reg and I were talking about this, this is still early on in the use of television. So, you know, when we think about the kinds of things that you see on television where a police chief might just hit somebody upside the head, and even if the camera was there, and what'd you say, Walter Cronkite is standing right there with a microphone, and there was no sense of, I shouldn't do this because it's going to be seen.
It took the authorities a while to figure out that, you know, these images going out actually have consequences. So let's get some other questions or
comments.
Yeah, comments. Yes.
What drew me into going to do voter registration was the semi-religious foundation of the movement. I mean, the movement actually came out of the black churches. And for those of us who were students up in the Northeast, you know, Martin Luther King was at Boston University, and we BU students got together with various contemporaries, and we started down there. But it was it was kind of a crusade. For our generation, it was a crusade in the good sense, in that we felt we had a moral obligation to put ourselves where the action was. And of course, we were 18 and 17 and 19 and 20, and we felt invincible. But it was something we did because it was the right thing to do, in the sense that it was moral. It was not just the Jewish thing, but the Christian thing. We weren't so afraid to say that we had a religious foundation then. And it was something that many people drew their strength from. And
now, when did you go for voter registration?
In 64, 65, and 66 was in Chicago. But going down there in an environment where we would feel completely foreign, it was a very humbling learning experience. Because as many people told us, you can get back in your van and go back to Boston, and we have to live here. But if we go register to vote, we got to worry about our jobs, we got to worry about this and that. And I saw the reality of it, because the Ku Klux Klan burned a cross on the lawn of the YWCA where we were staying. And you got to smell it for at least a week and a half, you know, and every time you went in and out the building, you could see the black, you know, on the ground, and smell oil and stuff. But anyway, it was a moral imperative. It was something that we had to do our part. Maybe like people felt in the Second World War, I don't know.
Yeah, the idea of what was, you know, what is behind it, what, you know. Now, did you feel a religious imperative, would you say? Was it an imperative with, you know, the political way that your family was? What would you say drew you into this?
Well, I wasn't religious, but I learned to respect how religious upbringing help people to believe in themselves and believe that they could overcome. And that sensation has stayed with me in activities that I've done. You know, mostly I've been involved in something ever since then. And, you know, outside of the fact that I have a job and it takes a lot out of me.
So that experience really did fuel a focus in your life.
Yeah, it was an enlargement of an environment that was that I was in, but it was smaller, and it was on a much larger scale. I think that, you know, in the 30s, there was struggles of all sorts that were on a much larger scale, and that had created an atmosphere that was part of the background of the struggle that came later. Because, you know, there's not as much attention paid to the role of organized labor in the civil rights movement. There's sort of that part of the picture is not addressed adequately or ignored. But the lessons of some of those same struggles, because workers were fighting against the bosses, and they would bring in the Pinkertons, they would bring in the thugs. There's no difference between that and the KKK. It's exactly the same. And that's what the other part of it, of course, is that the KKK was always doing the business, doing what big business wanted them to do. They didn't go against, they didn't bite the hand that fed them. Now, it's true that there was, in the ranks, there would be people who would be, understand that they were up against them, but they had been so confused by just everything in the society that they were in, and these were people on the bottom. Well, I mean, one of the things that we learned when looking at economics of the whole situation is that because of segregation, because of oppression of black people, that white people, actually the income of white workers in the South was lower in industrial workers than that of black workers in the North. Now, how many people knew that?
I mean, there's so many pieces. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the music, you know, what becomes the freedom songs in the civil rights movement, you can trace the music from the time of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad with the spirituals through the labor movement, when some of the same songs were being sung, and sometimes the words then were being changed a little bit, and then also into the civil rights movement. And even the song We Shall Overcome makes that same journey. It makes the journey from I'll overcome, you know, back in the time when it was a spiritual, you know, through the labor movement and then into the civil rights movement. So the music is also following that same journey. So why don't we do a song and then we'll take a few more, you know, thoughts and questions. How about Bend Down Into the South? So now, was anybody else here involved in the civil rights movement or in some of the struggles? Because I know around in the Boston area there were many struggles for desegregating. Anybody else? Because I know we have. No? Okay.
Well, the songs, of course, as we've been talking about, in many cases they were there to get information out. In many cases they were there to help to fortify community building. They would have mass meetings, as you probably know, and the meetings would go on for hours. They would prepare people, and they would give out the information. You know, they would tell people when the next march was going to come. They would tell them what was going on in the community. Largely, you really need to bolster people's spirits, and you need to get the word out. But other songs actually told the story of what people were doing, and this next song is one of those. It's called "Bend Down Into the South." Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Bend down into the South. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Bend down into the South. As we said earlier, these songs were all sung in community. So that's your part.
Okay. All right. So wait a minute. Everybody sit up, take a good stretch, and get ready. Yes, indeed.
We go 1, 2, 3, and Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
Say it again, say. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
That little couplet, been down into the South, comes back time and time again. So I'll say, well, I've never been to heaven, but I think I'm right.
Been down into the South.
There's folks up there, both black and white.
Been down into the South.
Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
Well, I've never been to heaven, but I think I'm right.
Been down into the South.
I don't want to go without my civil rights.
Been down into the South.
Say, hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
I've been walking around to spread the news.
Been down into the South.
So now got holes in all my shoes.
Been down into the South.
Sing hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
Well, if you don't think I've been through hell,
been down into the South.
Just follow me down to Parchment Jail.
Been down into the South.
I said, hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
Well, now the only thing that we did wrong,
been down into the South,
was stay in the wilderness a day too long.
Been down into the South.
Sing hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the South.
And the only thing that we did right,
been down into the South,
was on that day we took up the fight.
Been down into the South.
I said hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the
I
South.
said hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom.
Been down into the
I
South.
said hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Hallelujah, freedom. Been down into the South. Say what?
You know, back of the book.
Oh,
We
yes,
do.
we
So
do.
we'll save that
Yeah.
one. Now, well, we read something interesting I definitely wanted to ask you about. As we were reading Mike's story, you know, we saw the part about you were a few days before your 18th birthday. And so because of that, they kept you in the city jail when they sent the others with you
Off the park.
our
See,
punishment.
see, they had laws that they actually followed. And they wouldn't let somebody who was under 18 years of age go into the penitentiary.
Wow.
So they had to wait till after my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I went up with the next group. So I didn't go up with the group that I came into Jackson with, but I went up with another group up to Parchment.
Now, I guess what we were thinking though was when they sent the other group off and you were there by yourself.
That's true.
Because there's stories that you hear, you know, if a woman, you know, if you were a woman, you might have been raped while you were, you know, there by yourself. If you were, you know, they might have let you out of jail to go off and be lynched, you know, if you were black. So when we read that line, both Reggie and I were like, you were by yourself in the jail? So, I mean,
What was the population in the city?
Yeah, what happened when you were there?
They kept
Who
us
else was there?
segregated from everybody else in the jail.
Ah.
We never came in contact with anybody, and that's the same thing true at Parchment.
Mm-hmm.
Except when we first came in, but I won't go through that one. But
What happened when you first came in?
to Parchment?
I mean, even when you first came in the city jail.
Really, I can't explain how I felt. They had one of the black prisoners, and they brought him out in front of us and made him act like a fool. they were gonna really punish him bad if he didn't do exactly what they told him to do. And it was, you know about stereotypes. Well, that's what he was basically forced to perform as a stereotype. And it was just so, I don't know, I felt so bad that this was happening to that person. And it just helped me build my resolve to say we have to struggle and take away the ability to dominate and control and manipulate and force people. It was just awful. And I mean, I had a little bit more background, I think, than a lot of the other white men. That's how they segregated us in four ways in prison. And so I think that the people who were running the prison expected that they could actually have influence things their way by doing this. And I never talked to any of the other freedom riders about that while I was there. Partly because I wasn't sure if they would really understand it, what had happened. So yeah, there was something else that happened when I was by myself. They put me, and I never really understood what it was all about, but they put me in a cell side by side. I couldn't see the guy. There was a white prisoner who was basically local organized crime, one way or another, not in the northern style, but in the southern style. And of course, organized crime everywhere has had connection to the political system. Right. They only exist because the political system benefits. Some part of the political system benefits from it, historically. So this guy was telling me that he was going to be out in a few days. He showed me, he gave me a copy of the newspaper. Of course, we weren't allowed to see any newspapers any time when we were in jail.
But he had one.
But he had one, and he showed it to me with his picture, so I knew that he was, and what he told me was, he said, when you're going back to school or starting up school, because I was just getting started at UCLA, if you ever need any help, please call on me because I'll be able to help you out. I just don't understand that whole picture, but I certainly would never forget it.
Message received.
But it tells you that things were not simple. It was a complicated whole situation that made all of that. I mean, you all know of James Earl Ray.
Yes.
And what was the other guy who got killed? The other one of the people who was involved in the assassination.
No, this King assassination.
Yeah, I'm getting things mixed up. Not in the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, Oswald.
No, but not Oswald.
Jack
Ruby.
Jack Ruby.
Yeah, so Jack Ruby.
He was in organized crime as well.
He was organized crime, and he was strongly connected up. And he was a sensitive person that they could not allow to tell the true story that he knew about what actually happened. So people like this guy who was in jail with me, he was in a tenuous situation. On the other hand, he wasn't afraid to tell me what he wanted to tell me. I don't think they had I don't think they had eavesdropping on us while when the discussion took place. Nowadays, it doesn't matter where you are, somebody could be listening in.
What were you doing when you got arrested? The crew, were you just getting off a bus someplace?
No, we went into the bus station and we went into the, quote, colored waiting room and we sat down on a bench.
Oh, okay. That's
and then,
that.
well, I mean, that was all planned. And then we knew that we were going to be arrested. And
So
then-
did you ever actually ride the bus in the integrated fashion, or you did that on the way out there from L.A. to Jackson?
So that would have been from New Orleans to Jackson.
Well, you know, one of the things we were told is that while we were on the bus, we were not supposed to be talking about what we were doing. So we were just ordinary passengers.
So you're
and
basically.
the other thing was we were not supposed to do anything along the way that might keep us from getting to Jackson.
So your focused goal was to get to Jackson and plant and have that action.
Right, and then flood the jails.
Right.
That
and
was,
flood the
that was,
Okay.
that
How
was,
many people were you traveling with? You weren't like a whole bus full yourselves?
no,
then?
just 12 of us, all on a Greyhound bus. And I used it. I don't remember. Yeah, we didn't all come back together because we weren't all down there.
Right.
I think I came back by myself on the bus because I mean, you don't want, if you have a round trip ticket, you don't want to let the ticket go to waste. plus my family didn't have very much money. I mean, in emergency they could have done something that, got me a train ticket, but what's the difference between riding a bus and riding a train? It doesn't take much longer to get by bus than by train.
Was there other people on the bus beside you 12?
Oh, just ordinary passengers.
They didn't say nothing?
They didn't know who we were.
They weren't identifying themselves as anything in particular on the
Right. So you incognito. You went from L.A. to New Orleans, and then from New Orleans to Jackson. How did you all ride the bus?
Pretty much the same way, except that by that point, they knew when we got on the bus in New Orleans. They knew when we got on the bus in Los Angeles. In fact, a friend of mine found a book of photographs from the Los Angeles Times, and there's a picture of me and one of the other freedom riders right there in that book. And I had never seen that picture before. I didn't even know it existed. But and of course, they knew basically who all of us were well before we got there.
Remembering also that at this point the FBI was trying very hard to keep up with all those activities, and they were documenting as many things as they could. They had agents everywhere who were also keeping records and looking for networks, and they had informants who were also part of movements. So it was a well documented and well chronicled, even though the FBI, which of course in many cases knew that things were going to happen. I mean, they knew what the police chiefs had planned and all of that, and did absolutely nothing to stop it. So yeah, to the highest levels, it was.
J. Edgar Hoover thought there was a civil rights movement was a communist party anyway.
How long did you stay in Parchment?
I stayed there as long as I could stay and still be able to post a appeal bond and get out and be able to go back to school. So if you stayed longer than, I think it was something like 4 weeks, then even if you appealed, you had to stay the rest of the 6 months to serve out the
Who paid the
sentence.
bond?
Corps raised the money to pay the bond. And then every one of us who got bailed out had to come back for a retrial. And But in order to stay out on bail after that, it cost $1,000. And very few of the Freedom Riders were able to raise that money. And so they wouldn't go back. It just meant they, as long as they stayed out of Mississippi, they had no problem. Well, it turns out, I found out, or somebody found out for me, that the University of California would make loans up to $1,000 to undergraduates like myself to pay for school costs. And so they gave me a loan. And I had a check for $1,000, and I didn't take the Greyhound to go back to the second trial. It was the first time I ever flew on an airplane. And Corps had raised the money to send me back for the trial, because they wanted to have people for historical records to go through the whole process. And so and they knew that it was when it went actually all the way through the courts, they knew they were going to win, because we already won back in whatever it was, the 47 or something like that.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court had already decided. So the point being, I was able to get that $1,000, and later on, I wasn't in touch with people, but I found out, that the case had gone all the way through, and then I was just curious, well, what about that money? I mean, $1,000 was a lot more then than it is now.
Yeah.
And it turns out that UCLA, or University of California, knew exactly where their money was, and they went and got it.
Wow.
Interesting side story.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I had to check to take it down there because I had to have it with me. But after that was they didn't want me to get that $1,000 and not give it back.
Wow.
I mean, I would have given it back to them. I mean, that wasn't. They didn't want to take any chances.
Right.
They didn't trust me.
Well, you were a student.
Plus, the other side of it is, they were more of a position to get the money. They were stronger than I would have been if I had gone after it. Because Mississippi could have said, "Too bad, you just can't have your money back. Just that's the end of it."
That they went meant that the money, that there was a
well, they have more lawyers than we do.
yes. So do we have time for one more song?
I think that would be great. And I don't know if you have anything to add about your meeting with Diane Nash?
Oh, yes, because now Reggie just got back
on Friday
from a week-long trip to Mississippi with 12 high school students.
Wow.
Going to a Freedom Summer conference and also touring around in different places from the civil rights movement in Mississippi.
3 years ago, a friend of ours who was a professor at Siena College, Paul Murray, he teaches sociology there. And, every other semester he teaches a course on the civil rights movement. He went to Mississippi in 1966 and got arrested. And he was bailed out as well. Went back to teach in Mississippi a year later. And then over the course of years, that was a very powerful experience for him. So he's been very much doing research and also teaching. So 3 years ago, with the Freedom Riders reunion in Jackson, Mississippi, and we took 14 students, some from Siena College and some from Albany High School in Albany, New York, down to the Freedom Riders reunion. And so this year we thought, well, that one went well. So for the Freedom Summer celebration, we took the 12 students this year, and it was a very powerful experience. We gathered in Jackson, and actually in Meridian on first Saturday, and had a celebration there. And then we toured our students around through Philadelphia, Mississippi. We went to the spot where Goodwin, Turner, and Cheney were murdered. Went to James Cheney's grave, went out to the church that they were investigating, and went to several other. We went through the Delta, and the students got a chance to find out about a lot of the SNCC workers and the Corps workers who were working in that area. And then we went back to Tougaloo College in Jackson, which is a very long-standing college for African Americans, a traditional black college that has been at the forefront of the civil rights movement from pretty much their inception in 1879. And there, on the one Saturday, we went out and we were celebrating with the folks, and Diane Nash was there. It was the first time I ever got a chance to meet her. So it was a very powerful day of people who were just in the struggle and who have continued, as you have, in various and sundry ways, of committing their lives to finding ways to connect people to freedom and justice. So I had a moment
And,
with Diane Nash.
just a minute about Diane Nash. After, and I know many of you have seen, saw the film all the way through, but after that first group, the first buses were bombed and CORE was really going to stop the Freedom Rides, and Diane Nash and the students in Nashville, Tennessee, the student movement, they said, if all it takes is for violence to happen, people will think that all they have to do is be violent, and we will never work for our rights. She's an incredible person, but one of the funny things, I saw something, it wasn't part of this movie, but she did a long interview with Tavis Smiley on PBS, and the entire interview was online. You can transcript that, you can actually watch her give the interview. And what part of what I got out of that was that the students of the civil rights movement, it was they were not monolithic. There were some that were, from the church background. You were talking about that. There were others who weren't from a church background. What was great about Diane Nash is that she is black and Catholic, which is like me. So she was definitely my shero. But she talks about being part of the civil rights movement because she says when she came there, so many of the students were from the Baptist and Methodist churches. And they would look at her, and I remember this is 1961, and she's one of the leaders in the Freedom Rides. And they're like, Catholic? What is that? Like they just weren't used to seeing this. And so, she said, I didn't know all the songs they were singing because that's not what we were singing at our church. But she is quite a leader. So it was wonderful that Reggie got to meet her, and Bobby Kennedy knew about her.
One of my favorite lines in this film, and one of my favorite lines is when they call down and say, "Who the hell is Diane Nash?" She is still a feisty spirit. And talking about those who are, I was also with a person named Margaret Block, whose brother Sam Block was one of the movers and shakers in Mississippi, and particularly in the city of Cleveland and Clarksdale. And she also was talking about the fact she worked very closely with Fannie Lou Hamer. And she said, working with Fannie Lou Hamer, she says, was such a challenge because, first of all, Fannie Lou was fearless and just, committed in every single way. And she made sure that anybody working with her was also committed to that level. But she said, the thing about Fannie Lou was she was also a very, very deeply spiritual, religious woman. And she said, we, not so much. She said, so we would go out and we would work with her and we would charge and we would march and we would rally. And then when she went home, we go out and party our butts off. So yes, the movement was not monolithic.
No, it was not.
It took in people of different stripes. Their motivations were different, but the courage that they displayed is just unbelievable.
So, I guess we'll end up with a song. We will sing for you the Underground Railroad Spirituals version of the song from the 1800s, and then we'll sing for you the civil rights version of the same song. Now, we didn't ask you, did you do any singing in jail or on the bus or anything?
Well, we couldn't do it on the bus.
Not on the bus, right.
That's right, couldn't do it on the bus, right.
But they did it in the commercial.
Right? I mean, I know in jail they had you all segregated.
You got to consider, in this society, white men, including myself, had privileges. So among the four categories black men, black women, and white women,
Mm-hmm.
we were the least able to deal with the challenge of the oppressive force that was directed to us within the prison, even though it wasn't. So we didn't have the spirit of the others, and we were isolated from them. We were in a different wing. They were all on death row. Well, we were all on death row.
Mm. Wow.
Maximum security. It's the same thing. So other people could communicate with each other, and they would sing. But we didn't even hear them sing. We heard about it later. Of course, we also heard about them resisting and having their mattresses taken away and being thrown in solitary confinement. We knew about solitary confinement before we went in. We knew that if we messed up, when I say messed up, if we talked back or we did something that antagonized the guards, that's what would happen to us. And nobody wants to go into solitary confinement. Believe me, it's not a very pleasant kind of situation to be in. I almost got.
You almost got thrown into it?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
This was at Parchment.
Okay.
I won't tell you.
Something they didn't appreciate.
It was minor.
Okay.
The point is that it was disobeying the rules.
Okay.
Well, song.
Okay. So, one of the stories that comes up again and again in the spirituals is a freedom story from the Hebrew Bible, from the Jewish tradition, the story of Moses leading his people to freedom. And African Americans, really, we've taken that story to ourselves in so many ways and said, this is also our story. So that's why you have, Go Down Moses and Wade in the Water and so many of those spirituals based on that freedom story. And so here is another one of those songs. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep now. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Now, if I could, I surely would stand on the rock where Moses stood. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Now, if you miss me from the back of the bus and you can't find me nowhere, you just come on up to the front of the bus, 'cause I'll be sitting up there. Oh, I'll be sitting up there. I'll be sitting up there. Come on up. Come on up to the front of the bus, 'cause I'll be sitting up there. Now, if you miss me from Jackson State and you can't find me nowhere, well then come on over to Ole Miss, 'cause I'll be learning right there. Oh, I'll be learning right there. I'll be learning right there. Come on over. Come on over to Ole Miss, 'cause I'll be learning right there. Now, if you miss me from the Mississippi River and you can't find me nowhere, then come on down to the city pool, 'cause I'll be swimming right there. Oh, I'll be swimming right there. I'll be swimming right there. Come on down. Come on down to the city pool. I'll be swimming right there. Now, if you miss me from the cotton fields and you can't find me nowhere, then you come on down to the protest march, 'cause I'll be marching right there. I'll be marching right there. I'll be marching right there. So come on down to the protest march, and I'll be marching right there. Now, if you miss me from the protest march and you can't find me nowhere, well then come on over to Parchman Jail, 'cause I'll be living down there. I'll be living down there. I'll be living down there. So come on over to Parchman Jail, 'cause I'll be living down there. Now, if you miss me from Parchman Jail and you can't find me nowhere, well then come on down to the courthouse, 'cause I'll be voting right there. I'll be voting right there. I'll be voting right there. So come on down to the courthouse, 'cause I'll be voting right there. Now, if you miss me from the courthouse and you can't find me nowhere, well then come on down to the mayor's house, 'cause I'll be living right there. Oh, I'll be living right there. I'll be living right there. So come on down to the mayor's house, 'cause I'll be living down there. Well, if you miss me from the mayor's house and you can't find me nowhere, come on up to the White House, 'cause I'll be living up there. I'll be living up there. Oh yes, I'll be living up there. So come on up to the White House. I'll be living up there. I'll be voting right there. I'll be voting right. Come on to the courthouse. Come on down to the courthouse, 'cause I'll be voting right there.
To be here with Mike tonight, and in the spirit of people who stepped up when so many did not. And of course we know that the battle's not over. There's so many things in our country and in our world that we still need to continue to work for in terms of helping people to find justice in their lives and in all of our lives. And as it said, until all of us are free, then truly none of us are free.
So thank you to Diana for having us here at the
so
library. The library is the place to be. And Mike, it's incredible to hear your stories. So, thank you for all that you did. And can you just tell people what you're doing now? Because you're still working for justice.
Well, actually, I was very lucky to get a job in the first big study in the United States on the relationship between air pollution and health at Harvard School of Public Health. I was just looking for a job, and I sent out my resume all over the place. I didn't even know they had a job. and they ended up hiring me to set up a chemistry lab, because I got my PhD in chemistry. And so a lot of the rules that the EPA has set in place about restrictions on air pollution are related to research that I was involved in. So I feel good about that. But on the side, I'm involved with an organization called City Life Vida Urbana. And it's actually, it came from the neighborhood in Jamaica Plain, part of Boston, that I live in. And it has been struggling for housing justice for the last 36 years now. And one of the biggest challenges in housing justice has been the massive foreclosures because the bubble burst. And because the banks planned it that way. They knew what was going to happen. So what we have done in our organization is we have got people who have already been foreclosed on, and we say you can still fight. And we have won many people ability to stay in their homes. Maybe they're paying rent instead of owning it, but they've got a home to live in. And we have stirred up a lot of people into motion, saying you can fight and you can win. And the banks are a big symbol of the kind of control that is exerted on everyday people that we have to find a way to overcome. And we're committed to that, and we're going to struggle and keep struggling until we win.
Thank you so much for sharing.